Hello and welcome to my podcast. Today is day 2 of our Easter retreat. I hope it's going well for you. Today is Good Friday. This is the most difficult day, I believe, for Christians. Death by crucifixion was horrible, and the description of what happened speaks of cruelty, jealousy, fear arising from losing of power, and of course, abuse. The trial of Jesus was a complete miscarriage of justice. Technically, Jesus was executed as a political revolutionist. The inscription above Jesus' head on the cross read, "King of the Jews." This is ironic, as Jesus resisted any attempt to make him king. We see this in John chapter 6, verse 15. The witnesses at the trial contradicted each other. The Pharisees misused their power to keep their power. Fear of losing power can be threatening to some people and can lead them to commit acts, horrible acts. These same people will go to great lengths to protect their power. Sometimes we see this at our work, where people will stop at nothing to get ahead. I am wondering if this phenomenon is a phenomenon of mob mentality. Other terms for this phenomenon are herd mentality or crowd mentality. Mob mentality, first studied by Solomon Asch, refers to a psychological phenomenon where individuals adopt the beliefs, behaviors, or attitudes of the majority within a group. This influence often occurs at the expense of their own judgment or individuality. Individuals experiencing mob mentality will do more extreme actions than they would ever consider by themselves. This term is often used when trying to understand riots or acts of civil disobedience. In Matthew chapter 27, verse 24, we read that Pilate noted that a riot was breaking out among the people. So I'm wondering, this might be closer to the reality than we think. I've often wondered why Jesus died on the cross. Animal sacrifices were quite common in biblical times. Often sheep and goats would be sacrificed for the atonement of sins. It makes sense then that the early Christians might try to understand the crucifixion as part of a sacrifice. But I think there is more to this. Yes, I'm told that Jesus died for our sins, but it seems difficult to grasp the idea that a loving God would require a blood sacrifice to atone for our sins. The late Bishop John Spong challenges us about the image of Jesus being sacrificed. Why then was Jesus crucified? I'd like to read to you a passage from Romans chapter 5, verse 7 to 9. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners. This understanding of the crucifixion is far more life-giving and consistent with the teachings of Jesus. Christ died for us, so rather than see the crucifixion as part of a sacrifice, could the death of Jesus be a sign to us that God will stop at nothing to show us that we are loved, even to the point of God's death? God shows his love before any reconciliation. It's hard to accept the depth of this love. I am concerned that for many, much of their understanding of God comes from this view of him being harsh and demanding. I think much of our prayers that come from this leads to guilt rather than to love. I would even go as far as to say that this guilt is pathological and in some cases toxic. We are being held responsible for actions that we had little to do with. This doesn't mean that we have not sinned and indeed in need of forgiveness and reconciliation. There are two types of guilt that I want to draw your attention to. Healthy guilt usually comes from our conscience. We are reminded of our values, and we change our behavior to match our beliefs. Toxic guilt, however, comes from actions that we are not personally responsible, and we feel guilty. Interestingly, this is one of the symptoms of people who are depressed. They often take responsibility for situations that even though they had only minimal influence. Sadly, many Good Friday celebrations or ceremonies focus on guilt rather than God's unconditional love for his people. So, for your reflections today, I invite you to reflect on what conditions, if any, do you put on loving God. Secondly, I urge you to listen to Bishop Spong's lectures on YouTube. That's Spong, S-P-O-N-G. I think you'll find him rather interesting. I also invite you to consider doing the Way of the Cross. These 14 stations found in churches can be a source of inspiration for you and may even reflect parts of your own life. Think of the judgment judgment that you've experienced in your life. Think of the fall, the times when we have failed to follow up or to do what we know we need to do, or have done things we wish we hadn't, the times we have fallen from what we really believe in. Being stripped of all our pretense, being laid bare. These are all images that we ourselves experience and can help us bind our story to God's. I wish you all the best